child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again to a family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. You split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and say,
Shabbat Shalom. We'll be reading the Torah portion this morning. It begins in the Bereshit, chapter 31, verse 1. Genesis 31, verse 1. And it goes through chapter 40, verse 23. I'll be reading from the Complete Jewish Bible. Okay. But let's begin with blessing. Oh, how I love your Torah. It is my meditation all the day. Psalm 119, verse 97. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech ha'olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzavanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed art thou, Jehovah, our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with thy commandments and commanded us to engage ourselves in the words of the Torah. Yaakov continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner, the land of Canaan. Here is the history of Yaakov. When Joseph was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still a boy. Once, when he was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now, Yisrael loved Joseph the most of all his children because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a long-sleeved robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk with him in a civil manner. Joseph had a dream, which he told his brothers, and that made them hate him all the more. He said to them, "Listen, while I tell you about this dream of mine. We were tying up bundles of wheat in the field when suddenly my bundle got up by itself and stood upright. Then your bundles came, gathered around mine, and prostrated themselves before it." His brothers retorted, "Yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around." And they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he said. He had another dream, which he told his brothers. "Here, I had another dream. And there were the sun, the moon, and 11 stars prostrating themselves before me." He told his father too, as well as his brothers. But his father rebuked him. "What is this dream you've had? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. After this, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, Yisrael asked Joseph, "Aren't your brothers pasturing the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." He said to him, "Go now, see whether things are going well with your brothers and with the sheep, and bring word back to me." So he sent him away from the Hebron valley, and he went to Shechem, where a man found him wandering around in the countryside. The man asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," he answered. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the sheep?" The man said, "They've left here because I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They spotted him in the distance, and before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. They said to each other, "Look, this dreamer is coming. So come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these water cisterns here. Then we'll say some wild animal devoured him. We'll see then what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard this, he saved him from being destroyed by them. He said, "We shouldn't take his life. Don't shed blood." Reuben added, "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilds, but don't lay hands on him yourselves." He intended to rescue him from them later and restore him to his father. So it was that when Joseph arrived to be with his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the long-sleeved robe he was wearing, and took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, without any water in it. Then they sat down to eat their meal. But as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Ishmaelim coming from Gilad, and their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium, on their way down to Egypt. Yehuda said to his brothers, "What advantage is it to us if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers paid attention to him. So when the Midianim merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for ½ pound of silver to the Ishmaelim, who took Joseph on to Egypt. Reuben returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Joseph wasn't in it, tore his clothes in mourning. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I go now?" They took Joseph's robe, killed a male goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. When they sent the long-sleeved robe and brought it to their father, saying, "We found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not?" He recognized it and cried, "It's my son's robe! Some wild animal has torn Joseph in pieces and eaten him." Yaakov tore his clothes and, putting sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused all consolation, saying, "No, I will go down to the grave to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midianim sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, a captain of the guard. Chapter 38. It was at this time that Yehuda went off from his brothers and settled near a man named Hira, who was an Adulami. There Yehuda saw one of the daughters of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and slept with her. She conceived and had a son, whom he named She conceived again and had a son, and she called him Onan. Then she conceived yet again and had a son, whom she called Shelah. He was in Kisvi when she gave birth to him. Yehuda took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Yehuda's firstborn, was evil from Adonai's perspective. So Adonai killed him. Yehuda said to Onan, "Go and sleep with your brother's wife. Perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, and preserve your brother's line of descent." However, Onan knew that the child would not count as his. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground so as not to give his brother offspring. What he did was evil from Adonai's perspective, so he killed him too. Then Yehuda said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Stay a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, "I don't want him to die too, like his brothers." So Tamar went and lived at home with her father. In due time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Yehuda, died. After Yehuda had been comforted, he went up to be with his sheep shearers in Timnah, he and his friend Hira, the Adulami. Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law has gone up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's clothes, completely covered her face with her veil, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, but she still was not being given to him as his wife. When Yehudah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute because she had covered her face. So he went over to her where she was sitting and said, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, "Come, let me sleep with you." She answered, "What will you pay to sleep with me?" He said, "I will send you a kid from the flock of goats." She said, "Will you also give me something as a guarantee until you send it?" He answered, "Well, what should I give you as a guarantee?" She said, "Your sill with its cord and the staff you're carrying in your hand." So he gave them to her, then went and slept with her, and she conceived by him. She got up and went away, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothes. Yehudah sent the kid with his friend, the Adulami, to receive the guarantee items back from the woman, but he couldn't find her. He asked the people near where she had been, "Where's the prostitute who was on the road at Enaim?" But they answered, "There hasn't been any prostitute here." So he returned to Yehudah and said, "I couldn't find her. Also, the people there said, there hasn't been any prostitute here." Yehudah said, "All right, let her keep the things, so that we won't be publicly shamed. I sent the kid, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Yehudah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been acting like a whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of her prostitution." Yehudah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned alive." When she was brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law: "I am pregnant by the man to whom these things belong. Determine, I beg you, whose these are: the signet, the cord, and the staff." Then Yehudah acknowledged owning them. He said, "She is more righteous than I, because I didn't let her become the wife of my son Shelah." And he never slept with her again. When she went into labor, it became evident that she was going to have twins. And as she was in labor, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife took his hand and tied a scarlet thread on it, saying, "This one came out first." But then he withdrew his hand, and his brother came out. So she said, "How did you manage to break out first?" Therefore he was named Peretz, breaking out. Then out came his brother with the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was given the name Zerach, scarlet. Chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from Yishmaelim, who had brought him there. Adonai was with Joseph, and he became wealthy while he was in the household of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw how Adonai was with him, that Adonai prospered everything he did. Joseph pleased him as he served him, and his master appointed him manager of his household. He trusted all his possessions to Joseph. From the time he appointed him manager of his household and all his possessions, Adonai blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. Adonai's blessing was on all he owned, whether in the house or in the field. So he left all his possessions in Joseph's care. And because he had him, he paid no attention to his affairs except for the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome as well. In time, the day came when his master's wife took a look at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, because my master has me, he doesn't know what's going on in this house. He has put all his possessions in my charge. In this house, I am his equal. He hasn't withheld anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" But she kept pressing him day after day. Nevertheless, he didn't listen to her. He refused to sleep with her or even be with her. However, one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men living in the house were there indoors, she grabbed him by his robe and said, "Sleep with me." But he fled, leaving his robe in her hand, and got himself outside. When she saw that he had left his robe in her hand and had escaped, she called the men of her house and said to them, "Look at this! My husband brought in a Hebrew to make fools of us. He came in and wanted to sleep with me, but I yelled out loudly. When he heard me yelling like that, he left his robe with me and ran out." She put the robe aside until his master came home. Then she said to him, "This Hebrew slave you brought us came in to make a fool of me. But when I yelled out, he left his robe with me and fled outside." When his master heard what his wife said as she showed him, "Here's what your slave did to me," he became furious. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, in the place where the king's prisoners were kept. And there he was in the prison. But Adonai was with Joseph, showing him grace and giving him favor in the sight of the prison warden. The prison warden made Joseph supervisor of all the prisoners in the prison, so that whatever they did there, he was in charge of it. The prison warden paid no attention to anything Joseph did, because Adonai was with him, and whatever he did, Adonai prospered. Chapter 40. Sometime later, it came about that the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker gave offense to their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, in the same place where Joseph was kept. The captain of the guard charged Joseph to be with them, and he became their attendant while they remained in prison. One night, the two of them, the king of Egypt's cupbearer and his baker, there in prison, both had dreams, each dream with its own meaning. Joseph came into them in the morning and saw that they looked sad. He asked Pharaoh's officers there with him in the prison of his master's house, "Why are you looking so sad today?" They said to him, "We each had a dream, and there's no one around who can interpret it." Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please." Then the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream, there in front of me was a vine, and the vine had 3 branches. The branches budded when it suddenly began to blossom, and finally, clusters of ripe grapes appeared. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, So I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and gave the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph said to him, here is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. You will be giving Pharaoh his cup as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it goes well with you, and show me kindness, please, and mention of Pharaoh, so that he will release me from this prison. For the truth is that I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I've done nothing wrong that would justify putting me in this dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I too saw in my dream that there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the uppermost basket there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. Joseph answered, here is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off of you. He will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a party for all his officials, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer back to his position so that he again gave Pharaoh his cup. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Nevertheless, the chief cupbearer didn't remember Joseph, but forgot him. What questions or comments do you have on today's Torah portion? I think it's fascinating that we find this is the history of Yaakov, and we immediately learn about Joseph, right? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Yes?
Why was it okay for Joseph to sleep with what he saw as a whore when he was not married? And he was, or Judah, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
okay, yeah, all right.
For him to sleep with a whore when he was not married, but wanted to put her away because he thought she was a whore.
So, okay. Yeah, go ahead and ask that again, and so everybody can hear it, although it'll give me time to think, too.
Why was it okay for Judah to sleep with someone when he was not married to her, but yet wanted to put her away when he thought she was a prostitute? But the whole point is he wasn't married.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good question. I don't think the text actually says that it was okay, that what he did was okay. It states the facts. God's word is stating the facts as they're given. Now, there is one mitigating circumstance, of course, because Yehuda's wife had died. And she had borne 3 sons to him, but then she had died. And now he was going up, traveling to shear his sheep of Timnah, and I don't know. He has this friend of his who's not, he's might have some influence on him. They've been around quite a while now. And he helps him in this enterprise, right? And so he negotiates with the prostitute, does not realize that it's actually Tamar, right?
Doesn't matter because he wasn't married to her.
He was not
was
married to
judging
her.
her for
No,
something he
no, he
wasn't
was
even
not
doing
married to
wrong.
her. No. So
He says, she is more righteous than I. So he confessed his fault, but at the end of the exchange, he says, Judah says, she is more righteous than I, when he had accused her of sin, meaning he was confessing his sin too.
I understand that. However, it was the condemning at the beginning, because if she never revealed herself, he would have never said anything positive about her.
That's right, because he was lying.
Yes.
Yeah, lying causes sin
Yeah.
and is a sin, further sin. So anyway, that's how that happened, a lie.
So this text does not say that what he did was righteous or that was all right. Okay, but what is said is that as Tony Robinson would point out, there is a connection here with even a greater sin, the sin of kidnapping his own brother and selling him into slavery. Yeah.
So with Tamar, and she was married to the brothers, the sons of Judah, rather. She had no children prior to Zerah and Perez. Is that correct? Okay, so I think one of the twins is of the lineage of Jesus Christ, can be traced back to him. And this may not be correct, but as I was doing some studying a while back, and I can't remember which twin, that one of the individuals had all their sons were murdered, but the daughters of one of the twins was then left alive to carry on the seed of Yeshua through Zerah. Is that correct? Do you
That's
know?
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, David. Yeah. So God moves in mysterious ways. We don't always, and we see this revealed in Scripture as well, how he can take terrible situations and bring good from them. He's a master at it.
Yeah, we know Judah had problems, right? So just like he sold his brother, and they brought the coat to Jacob with blood, just as Tamar showed him the signet and the cloth, and that was Yahweh's way of, measure for measure and trying to correct Judah and make a righteous nation through Judah, just as what Joseph went through. I mean, it's a beautiful picture of the two houses, right, with Judah and Ephraim. So I think that's the main story behind Tamar. And that's why he said she's more righteous than I, because she wanted to continue his seed. It says he had two sons, Joseph had two sons. So there's so many patterns in this portion.
Yeah, right. So there's a connection there because we see what happened with the deception of their father, Jacob. The sons, they bring his long-sleeved robe dipped in goat's blood. And whose are these? Do you recognize it? And so then Tamar turns the tables here in that respect. Of course, God knows what's going on, whether she was aware of all that or what she couldn't have been. Or if I don't think the brothers divulged what they did to anyone. But God knew, right? And so that's clear here, that this is a pricking of Yehuda's conscience, and also a lesson learned. He's learning a very painful lesson here. I think one of the reasons, and this is just supposition on my part, we have this part is not supposition, what I'm about to say. Some people think, what's this doing in here? We're hearing about Joseph, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we're over here with Yehuda, and now we're going to come back to Joseph, right? But it's not out of place. It's very pertinent to what's going on here. Because Joseph is firstborn son of Yaakov and Rachel, his first choice, right? The wife. Yehuda is the firstborn son of Yaakov's wife, Leah, who he married first, of course. Yeah, through deception as well. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But you say, wait a minute. Yehuda was the fourth in the line. But see, Reuben lost his standing because he defiled his father's bed. Shimon and Levi, the next two, lost their position because they murdered all the males of Shechem. And so Yehuda was the firstborn of the first wife. So there's but that was part of the problem as well, the reason they hated it. This was more than just what we would normally call sibling rivalry in a family, because there was so much at stake here. And the hatred that was there, that was fueled. There was already dynamics within the family between Yaakov's obvious favoritism towards Rachel, and then later to his firstborn son through Rachel. Yes, I know he was deceived. But even that can be seen as a part of God's judgment as well. Because, Yaakov did not know it was Leah because it was dark. He couldn't see. He didn't see that it was Leah instead of Rachel. Just like his father, Yitzhak, did not see that he was not Esau. So these are connections that come into play, that God uses even our own actions today as well. We have lessons to learn too. And one of the things is that not everything that happens to you that's bad is judgment upon you for something bad that you did. Now, yes, whenever we sin, there will be consequences. There are there are consequences to sins. Yeah, don't get the other way around. But not everything bad that happens to people is because of your sins. It's not God's judgment. It could be God's deliverance. God is involved in all of our lives to bring about our own deliverance and the deliverance of others. We call it salvation. And sometimes that requires some difficult things to go, some trouble to go through in life. Because this life is not, so we can take it easy and have few regrets in life. That's the way of the world. They try to maximize their opportunities, try to live with the least amount of regrets, and try to maybe make the most of these few days that they have on this life, because that's all that they think they have. That's all that there is. That this is actually God's testing ground, God's proving ground, God's teaching. Torah is instruction. But God also uses life itself, instruction for all of us. So that's another lesson that we learn from this as well, right? Okay.
Tamar was acting righteously. Now, the Torah wasn't given at that time, correct?
The written Torah was not.
Torah.
That they, of course.
They knew.
Yeah, and a lot of Christian believers love oral Torah. We put that off to the side. But you know what? It's obvious there was oral Torah. It's obvious there was oral Torah. Now, whether what we have written down now is called the Oral Torah. Whether that is, okay, that's a question for debate. But we do have the written Torah, we know that. And we also have admonition that not to use human tradition to replace God's word. And that is where the Oral Torah has been, let me just say, somewhat muddled, all right?
Well,
Go ahead.
Tamar was acting righteously. She knew what was to be done and what was expected. So she was trying to go along the right lines to do what was right as far as getting the brother,
Yeah.
to give her seed. And so she was acting righteously. And then Judah, sent her home to be a widow, to just be with her father. Just be a widow.
Yeah.
That's not very nice, So anyway, then when that whole thing happened, and she was obedient, she went home, and she stayed there as a widow with her father, and not having any expectation of having a child to carry on the lineage, and she wanting to do righteously by carrying on the lineage. And then when the whole thing happened when she made herself look like a prostitute, Judah was willing to give his prayer shawl, his tzitzis, his prayer shawl, and his signet ring, because he's a leader, he's a high up person, and his staff. I mean, if you're like a righteous Jew and you have these things, you wouldn't be so quick to give them up, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that was his tzitzi. The cord, there was a seal and a cord that was used for identification purposes. So that makes sense that this is something somebody wants, like, sometimes we have, like, somebody might hold a driver's license or something like that until you come back with the money or whatever it is, because they know you're going to need that, right? So type thing. But still, you're right. The point is, yeah, she was doing what was right. Now, did she use deception to do that? Well, yes, but it wasn't like that was her first choice. Now, consequently, though, already she now has a reputation within the family of being a deadly woman. A deadly woman, not a righteous woman. She was blamed for the deaths of his sons.
For their action, what they did?
Yeah. But that's God telling us. What do people think? Oh, she's a deadly woman. And that's exactly what Yehuda did. He didn't, because he said, my third son will die. So he was trying to keep him as far away from this deadly woman as possible. And there is that negative connotation. So sometimes our actions, although we may have pure motives, can be misinterpreted and misunderstood and misconstrued. For example, Joseph himself with his dreams. Where did those dreams come from? Well, that was from God. They were divine. Now, did he apply those in that manner? He's a young boy and he's in a dynamic family, and there's a lot of stuff happening there, right? There's a lot going on. So it's troubling times, no question about it. Could he have done a better job? Yeah, of course he could. Any one of us, if we went back and could be teenagers now, knowing what we now know. I'm talking, some of you probably are teenagers, right? But if someone as myself, 70 years old, could go back and be a teenager again, I would not make some of the mistakes that I made. I'd probably make even worse mistakes. But yeah, the point is, we learn. We do learn. There is some wisdom that comes if God grants us life, and if we are open and sensitive to God, and we're studying His Word. Yeah. But and that was a good point, that the point that was being made about oral Torah. I'm not sure where that came at. That was good because we have Levirate marriage. How can they have Levirate marriage? Levi, we have not received the written Torah yet, but he's talking about, basically what he's talking about here is a Levirate marriage. And so there are elements here, And even though Abraham did not have written Torah, he still practiced Torah as well. So yes, there was oral Torah. There was.
I just want to make one last point. I think that Judah knew his sons were unrighteous, what they did. I mean, God judged them immediately. Whereas when she went into Judah, she was blessed. She conceived immediately and with twins. And that's usually a blessing from Yah. And what happened was Judah even exonerated her and said, she is more righteous than I.
Yeah, that's right. And so that we see a change of heart. We see life experience. This took years to happen, right? But we're going to continue to see that played out too. But Judah could not, I believe Yehuda could not stand to see his father's constant grief. And so there was a high price to pay, much higher than he ever imagined it would be. And I don't know. I don't know how these brothers were able to keep quiet. What kind of vow they took to each other to keep their lips sealed. Or maybe they thought, boy, if he is grieving this much, what would happen to me if I actually confessed to him? I don't know. We don't know the full story. We're given the facts that we need to have, that God wants us to have, and there is more. And we can pray for increased insight, wisdom, and understanding. And we'll gain some of that just by the own decisions and actions that we make as a result of our study of the Torah and the application of it to our life. And let's keep in mind that we have the living Torah. So we talk about oral Torah and written Torah, but there's also living Torah. That's Yeshua HaMashiach, right? And which I will now close with a blessing. All right. We're almost out of time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech ha'olam, natan lamu Torah emet, Yeshua Mashiach, v'kayeh olam v'ata b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha-Torah. Blessed art thou, Jehovah our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth, Yeshua, our Messiah, and set everlasting life in our midst. Blessed art thou, Jehovah, giver of the Torah. Oh, how I love your Torah. It is my meditation all the day. Psalm 119:97.